Hello and welcome. If you are here, you already know we are about to talk about the Sacred Purpose Blueprint course, led by Angell Deere. If you're here, you probably know him, but I'm going to read a quick, very truncated version of his bio. So, Angell Deere is a holistic wellness advocate and founder of The Sanctuary, a shamanic healing center in the Catskills Mountain, and the New York Bee Sanctuary, dedicated to bee conservation. Formerly a CEO in the luxury, retail, and sustainability sectors, Angell left the corporate world to pursue a deeper spiritual calling, embracing Andean cosmology and Norse shamanism. As a sought-after speaker, Angell shares his journey from corporate success to spiritual enlightenment, offering profound insights into wellness, spirituality, and environmental stewardship. Angell, I'm so happy to be here with you today as a student of yours. And I'm excited to learn more about this new offering. But why don't we start out with a little bit of your backstory, which we referenced in the bio, but obviously going from CEO to shaman is a big, a big shift. Can you just give us a little snapshot of who you were then and why you decided to make such a profound shift in your professional and personal life?
Yes, thank you, and good to be with you, Amanda. I, spent probably 20 years of my life climbing the corporate ladder, building good success, I would say, there on the metrics of what is being successful, making money, and having, everything I need, and running bigger and bigger companies, starting my own businesses. But what became very clear to me at some point is that I had a different calling in my life. And because of my education, because of my family, the system I'm living in, I had no idea how to find that. But I could feel that there was a part of me that was very unfulfilled. And in fact, the more I was climbing this ladder, the more I felt purpose and meaning was not that present in my life. And so I went on a journey of self-discovery, of self-exploration. I spent many years, studying other type of learning or type of education, more traditional, more ancient, meeting people that were fully embodying their calling, and then started the sanctuary, developed that offering, the Sacred Purpose Blueprint that we'll talk about. And then people started contacting me because they're like, "Oh, you are exactly like me. Like who you were is exactly like
Yeah.
me, right? Yeah, I have this big job, or I'm working from home. I have an income, but I have this passion. I have these things that I want to do, and I've never done it because I'm afraid. I'm afraid of losing my income. I'm afraid of the changing of lifestyle. I just don't know how to get into that. And very often people just step a little bit into it and then step out. Or they even book a call with me, and they're like, "Oh, I'm really excited about it." And then the fear and the resistance come back and they're like, "Well, I'm going to do this first, right?" And, I spent 20 years doing that. So I can understand that it takes
Same.
time to build this. Yeah, you didn't know that, true, right?
Yeah.
To build the stamina. But I think people today in the world we are living in, and maybe it's because of COVID and many things that happen in our society, what's going on in politics, in the economy, people are realizing life is short, life is precious, and I want to look back and feel like I have no regrets.
Yeah.
I don't want to have that thing in the back that I never pursued because I was afraid of it or I didn't know how to do it.
Yeah. Well, what you're speaking about, I believe, is the achievement trap, which you talk a lot about in the Sacred Purpose Blueprint. So I'm wondering if you can kind of define what the achievement trap is, and perhaps some common signs that someone might realize, oh crap, I'm in the achievement trap.
Yeah, I think first we learn some kind of GPS for our life, right? Some kind of compass about what does it mean to be fulfilled and successful. And very often that comes with, achieving a certain amount of money that we make, achieving a certain position in society, achieving some kind of ownership of houses and goods and things. But very often as we do that, we start to feel that we're never really fulfilled. I mean, I have so many clients that basically come on that program because they're like, every Monday morning, I just dread going back to the office. I just don't really like it. Or I don't want to do this job anymore. And that's not new. So we start realizing we're living a lie. But the trap is that we believe that if we push that forward, if somehow we get a better job, we have an increase in income, or we move to a better company, that somehow seems to provide more to us, that we are going to escape that. But literally, we're entrapping ourselves more and more because we are basically walking a path or pursuing something that is not really us.
Mm.
And the more we grow into it, the further away very often we get from what truly matters to us, what it is that we want to do.
Yeah. So, when high achievers find themselves, making that next income bracket, the 300K to 400K or whatever number it is that people are reaching for, why do you find that that still does not give them the satisfaction that they're craving?
Well, first there are some very interesting study about the connection between the level of income and the level of happiness of people. And it depends obviously where you live and the kind of lifestyle you have, but it's pretty low where the peak of the happiness is.
Mm.
I think it's around 100K or 75K even. It's like it's
Yeah.
not even there. And after that, because we are trapped into that consumption and making more and maybe paying bigger rents or bigger mortgages, we kind of trap in that. And that decrease happiness because that increases the pressure to produce, to
Yeah.
generate income. And therefore, we kind of stay in that cycle. But because we are taught that, well, no, this next bracket or this next job is going to make you really happy, we believe that. And so often people say, yeah, it's great. I got this new thing a year ago, but I felt good for like a few months, 3 months, 6 months. And then my feeling of not feeling at peace, not sleeping well, having anxiety, the level of stress is even higher. Basically, I'm not more happy.
Yeah.
And people, I think, start realizing that. I mean, I'm thinking of one client, one student of mine. She's a billionaire, right? She's out there in terms of what she owns, and she has many, many businesses and own lands and have restaurants and hotels and things like that. And she came into the program. And from the outside, you would think, wow, anyone that achieves this level of success should be happy. And in fact, our level of stress and happiness is really high somehow. But somehow, because of, I guess, the comfort of those jobs or the income or the social network is provide, sometimes it can make the pain be numb a little bit and we don't
Yeah.
have to feel it as much. And I think that's another aspect of the achievement trap, is that the comfort can be something nice. And I'm not saying don't make a lot of money. There's no
Yeah.
problem with that. But if there's a misalignment with who you are, the discomfort is going to be there one way or
Yeah.
another.
Yeah. So speaking of that, you mentioned that you were sort of half in, half out for a long time. I know I was as well professionally. What kind of pain, struggles, symptoms? What are some of the kind of signs that you're not living in alignment? If maybe you haven't put your finger on it, oh, I'm living out of alignment, but you know that something's missing or that you're having certain pain or struggles. So can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of different things, but it's all not always something we can clearly identify. It's coming from the fact I'm misaligned with my
Yeah.
purpose, because most people don't know what
Yeah.
exactly they're here for, right? But there's definitely this feeling that we don't wake up super excited about our life. We don't wake up really excited about that things that we are doing, right? We might enjoy it to a certain degree, we might be good at it. But we feeling we're missing, maybe more connection with our family. We're wanting a kind of a different lifestyle. We don't want to be that stressed. We want to have more personal time. And we have very often, and that's one of the ways to know we're aligned with purpose. Purpose and sacred alignments serves a lot of other people in a good way. It provides to the rest of the world some great service in some ways. And there are a lot of more modern study on that fulfillment really come from being of service.
Mm.
Right? And so often the job we have don't do that.
Yeah.
Not just because we're working for someone else, but because what we are doing doesn't feel like it has really an impact on the way we want to see the world.
Yeah. Now, what if someone were listening who's thinking, well, this sounds great, but I have no idea what my purpose is. Is this the type of course of training that helps them sort of tap into what their sacred purpose is, versus people who come and say, I know this is my purpose. I've just been, you know,
Mm.
not.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think most of the people don't have a clear view of what that look like.
Yeah.
That's the kind of life I want to live, but they have ideas on the feeling they want to experience or what that might look like. But they have usually hard time to visualize it as a job or
Yeah.
as a way of living, right? Because sometimes we don't have the skills or we don't know how to go from point A to point B. Personally, and like many people I have met and I work with, we don't know what it is. And the reason is that it's buried under so many layers of self-belief, fears, anxiety. There are a lot of things that prevents really accessing it. So we might feel like, yeah, I know it's there, but I don't really know why I'm not stepping into it, or I don't know what to step into. When
Yeah.
I left my corporate job and when I went on that quest, I had no idea I would be doing what I'm doing now. And probably someone would have told me, hey, this is where you're going to be in 10 years, in 5 years, I would have looked at them like they're really crazy.
Yeah.
Right? But from a more traditional perspective, we believe that we come into the world with this. We come full. The Western world say you come empty and you
Mm-hmm.
have to learn this and you have to learn that. And that's how you're going to feel yourself. But the more traditional perspective that you come with skills, you come with talent, you come with a very important role, and your goal is to unleash that. So even if you have no idea what it is, I know it's there. It's always there, by definition, because you are here, you have a purpose, right?
Right.
And that's what created the pain. In fact, if you were living in alignment and there was no other voices in you, you would feel completely fulfilled and happy and blessed. The reason that even if you don't know what it is, but you're feeling like that's not it, it means there is something else that's telling you that, right? And that's the quest.
So let's talk about the voices, right? Because I think
Mm.
a lot of people, myself included, still to this day, right? Those fears and those blocks, those mental hurdles that come in. Um, I guess first, like, what are some of the common ones? Because once again, people might be hearing themselves in your story, but maybe not recognizing that some of those fears are actually blocking them from their purpose. What are some of the most common fears, and how do you help people dismantle, or what can people do to start dismantling those fears?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest one of people is that they are going to step into a void and they're not going to make any money and they're going to be more lost than they are today. So it's that fear of the unknown.
Mm.
It's like, I know who I am today, even if I'm not fulfilled or happy, but at least I have control. And the fear of the unknown and the desire to control everything in our life are very connected. Right? And that's, I think, the biggest one. That's why we address it in the program quite early in the program, because once you start connected to what we call the unknown or the unseen, once you start connected to that inner voice and taking steps with it, and you realize what happened, which open things, which creates abundance, which feel very different, then you start trusting that space. You start having a connection to that space. But if you spend your whole life controlling everything, only moving from where you believe that that's the only way. In fact, when I say unknown, for most people, they're like, how do you even listen to the unknown? How do you even see what the unseen, right? It sounds very bizarre to the mind. that needs to know A and B in order to move from A to B.
Right.
But there are something in us that push us to explore, to do new things, to grow, to expand. And that's the part in us that carry transformation, that carry new possibilities. If you constantly stay within that frame of fears, well, you're going to stay the same, right? If you don't change anything, you're just going to end up being the same. So that's a big one, I think. Then I think there is the fear of money, income, and say, well, if I have this job, or if I'm doing this and I'm providing for my family, what's going to happen if I step into something very different? Well, the truth is, yeah, you can stay in it and you can still make that income and not being fulfilled, or there are steps you can take in order to transition that. Obviously, it's not an overnight process. It's not like, hey, it's not about even quitting your job in many ways, right? It's about preparing the transition, right? So in the same way that, I don't know, you want to buy a new house, you just don't do that in 5 minutes. You're going to prepare, you're going to pack your stuff, you can put in boxes, you're going to hire a mover, right? So there are steps that you do so the transition can be smoothed out. And in fact, even if it feels scary, there is a way to do that where the financial aspects are managed properly, right? And I think one of the things that is not often talked about because it's not always obvious or acknowledged is the fear about the judgment of others.
Mm.
Your actual social network, your family, maybe even your husband or your wife, people looking at you like, why would you do that? Why would you quit everything, or why would you change your life so much? And we are a species that is designed for belonging. In fact, most of the safety system in us have been created tens of thousands of ago. And if you were to leave your tribe, it was certain death.
Yeah.
Literally, you had to stay with the group. And that system obviously worked really well. We're here to talk. So we survived the
Yeah.
wild, right? We survived, all the big change that happened on this planet. But it's not very adapted to the world we're living in, where you're not going to walk into your garden and the lions is going to attack you and kill you, right? There's little chance of that, quitting your job. But in fact, quitting maybe what you're doing, changing your life path, is triggering that system internally. And that's a very powerful system. It's hardwired into us. And there are ways to access that system, to calm it down, to nurture it, to rationalize and create new stories in order to prevent it from firing too strongly, which will basically prevent you from starting even this quest.
Yeah. What about fear of failure, right? Are people coming in afraid, like, oh, I'm going to change everything and then, I'm going to pick the wrong thing, or I'm not going to do it well enough, or whatever. I'm sure, people coming from the achievement trap are bringing the achievement mindset to their purpose as well.
Yeah, that's very true. It's interesting because I think people don't always mention it, so I don't know if it's as conscious. My experience with it is that if you're being successful in certain aspect of your life, you're probably skilled in some ways, and applying the skills to whatever new things you are going to do is going to be successful in many ways. In fact, a lot of the success I had in the past and things I was able to do is very valuable for what I'm doing today, even if my life is very, very different what I do.
Yeah.
But I believe the skills that I learned and the experience that I had, all of that provided me also with tools to be successful in that new version of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's great and reassuring for people to hear, right? Because I know that some people have that thought of, well, I'm throwing everything away, everything I worked so hard for, all the skills, everything I learned, right? And what you're saying is, no, actually, whatever you learned as a CEO or a lawyer or an accountant or whatever, could potentially be of great value
In
when you
fact,
just take.
all of that is going to be of
Yeah,
great value.
yes,
All of that is really important,
yeah,
right? And
Yeah.
people that are successful in those transformation, very often it's not just because of the new skill they are learning, but the old skills they are bringing into that
Yeah.
new version of themselves. Yeah.
I think that's great for people to know.
Yeah.
So obviously it's called the Sacred Purpose Blueprint, but can you speak a little bit to the role that spirituality plays in finding one's sacred purpose? And I'm sure everybody that maybe not everybody, but people are coming to you with different spiritual backgrounds, different understandings of what spirituality means. So talk a little bit about that piece.
Mm. Well, I mentioned the fact that if we are here in this time on earth and we have somehow being born, there is an ancient understanding that we have a purpose, right? And we are the only animal or even living being on this earth that kind of question that in some ways. The oak tree doesn't question its role, the deer doesn't question it, the dandelion doesn't. Any animals, any living being out there doesn't have this view of itself that somehow it is not relevant or it only fit into that system that is man-made. It's all interwoven. And so the fact that people are experiencing discomfort, which sometimes can be pretty strong, lack of sleep, anxiety, high level of stress, just tell us that there is something somehow not healthy, not in service of that person in the way people are living their life. If people could say, well, that's because we're human and we're different and somehow, that's where we're living. I say, yes, I mean, that works to the extent that you're already fulfilling your life.
Yeah.
But somehow we have kind of accepted at some point, I don't know how aware, that that's just how life it is. It's just hard and you suffer. And yes, working is hard and, the stress is normal because you should be really stressed if you have a big job or, all the things that we see as normal and accepted. To me, today sounds very bizarre.
Yeah.
They were not at the time because at the time I saw it was the cost of this kind of life, right? And ultimately, it's like if the cost is fine to you, then keep going,
Yeah.
right?
Turn off the webinar now if the cost is fine.
Yes, but very often, and that happens in many people I see, is that something really big happened. They say that if you don't step into your purpose, somehow something is going to come and hit you in the head and push you into it.
Yeah.
And that could be losing a job, that could be a divorce, and that could be illness, right? To wake you up that this is not who you're supposed to be. This is not, you cannot live that way much longer. And so I think we don't want to wait to be hit by something really difficult to manage. So sometimes it's just time to say, okay, maybe there is something there. Maybe all those ancient tradition that says that we are born with a purpose, that we have some kind of sacred mission to execute are right. And what are the tools? What are the things I could do, in order to approach that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I know this answer because I work as an executive coach, but what value does working with a coach? People often think about spiritual journeys or self-reflection journeys as solitary things. You have to go into the cave and figure it out yourself or whatever. So I'm curious, what value does having a coach, a guide, having you on this journey really bring to somebody who is trying to get out of this achievement trap?
Yeah, I mean, to me, ultimately, if it was just a workshop or a book you could read and figure it out, the book will be known by now, right? There will be a known book say, just read that and it's going to fix your life, right? I think ultimately, and I mentioned it in the webinar, it's not about what you need to do, but with who you are going to do it. Who did it? Who has experienced exactly the kind of fear, troubles, question that you have and walk that fire through that fire. I've had a coach and spiritual mentors and teacher literally for the last 25 years.
Mhm.
I've literally still have a coach to this day, that I work every week with. I have one spiritual teacher, which is my teacher for many years now. I have elders that I can turn to for questions. I never had a time in my life where I never had a mentor of some kind, right? And I will not be here today without them. Because the thing is, we need someone to reflect to us what we cannot see. If we could see it on our own, it would be very easy. But it's
Yeah.
not that easy because there are so many layers in our psyche in order to see ourselves authentically and truly. And we need the reflection, we need the guide. you know Ultimately, that's going to be our journey. Whatever is going to be discovered is ours. The coach is not here to provide you with answers. He's going to provide you with better question and say, hey, reflect on that. And people are usually like, wow. I had a client the other day say, this is like the best question someone ever asked me. Right. So I didn't provide her with an answer. I just provided her with a very different question about looking at herself, right? And
Yeah.
that's going to bring the wisdom. And that shows that we know. That shows that we have somehow this wisdom inside, but we don't have the right tools always to explore that. And the coach, the mentor, the guide, however you want to call it, I still don't know how I want to be called, to be honest, is the person that is going to provide you with a better question, with some kind of roadmap for you to navigate your terrain.
Yeah. And would you say to some degree that you've taken what you learned in your own journey, maybe a little bit more of the hard way or the long way or the challenging way, and sort of codified it into this course? Um, is that sort of how you came up with the methodology that you present in the course?
Yeah, I mean, and on purpose, I didn't make the class very spiritual or very kind of, you know, worthy in the spirit world, because for me, it's for everyone. And I have people that are not spiritual in some
Mm,
ways, right? But are interested to really step into their power. But there are tools that took me 15 years to learn and to understand, that I put into the program in a format that someone that is a beginner can really understand and use immediately. In fact, tools that I wish I understood 15 years ago that way, because it would have saved me a lot of time and money and troubles. So I think for me, the goal was, how do I mix that ancient wisdom, those spiritual tools, and modern techniques, things
mm,
that are more from modern psychology or modern ways of looking at oneself, and put it in a format that is accessible and yet very profound. The program is 12 weeks. It's not 5 years. So the goal is to deliver. How do we do that in 12 weeks? And that's been the lot of months and years that I spent to develop that and to find this solution that I believe, works really well.
Yeah. Well, when you get to the bottom of many different wisdom traditions, right? Whether it's Buddhism, shamanism, even some of the stuff from the executive coaching or somatic experiencing lexicon, they're kind of always all getting at the same
Hmm.
things, many
Yes.
of the same things. So what you're saying is that you've put it in a language where if you aren't somebody who is like overtly spiritual, you could still find it relatable and useful. It's not unapproachable in that way.
Yeah, I want it to be really, accessible for everyone. Literally, I thought about a friend of mine when I was building the program to develop it for her,
Mhm.
in mind. And she's not that spiritual. She's never done any spiritual training. And then I added a weekly module that is more spiritual, that is more shamanic. So if people, it's kind of an option. I mean, it's integrated into the program, but you don't have to listen to it. You don't have to go through it in order to achieve the transformation. But for the people that wish to have a deeper spiritual shamanic teaching, that's available in the program, right?
Got it. So when people start to align with their sacred purpose, how will they know? What kind of changes can they expect? What will be some signs that like, oh, I'm on the right track. I'm leaving behind the achievement trap and I'm, walking more closely to my path.
It's interesting. I'm thinking of a woman that I just met literally a few weeks ago that just started. and she's in her 50s, and she owns a few food stores in North Carolina. So she has 2 or 3 food health stores. She's been running that since she's 14 or 15. It's her parents' business. And she started the program, and she literally messaged me last night and say, Angell, I've never felt so present and so grounded in my entire life. She literally, I think, went through 3 videos. She literally went through just a few exercise, and that made me really smile. And for me, that's one of the signs,
Mm.
is that your connectedness with the self, your presence is very different. There is something, maybe more spiritual, or, a little bit harder for people to understand, but that is very true, is that when we get closer to alignment with what we're supposed to do, there is a sense of peace that arises. I'm not saying there's no stress, because there's stress in everything you do. There's stress with your kids and you love them, right? So it's not like you have no stress, but there is such a deeper connection with the self that it's a stress we say yes to. It's a very different kind than the one we say, oh my God, I just can't do this anymore, right? It's more like, yeah, I'm stressed, but I'm excited, I'm engaged. So it's a really, ultimately, I think it's a change in chemistry in the body too, because there is this alignment and presence that really shift the way we feel. And because the way we feel changed, the way we see ourselves, the way we see the world, the way we see the path looks very clear.
Yeah.
If you're very stressed and anxious and all that, when you look at the past, it's chaotic, it's confused, it's not clear, right? But if you settle those energies, if you have tools and techniques in order to settle that into your body, yeah, you might face a big question or even the unknown, but have some kind of solidity into it, some kind of strength and grounding into it.
That sounds great. More peace, more presence, more clarity. All of that sounds amazing.
That's how we're supposed to wake up, right? That's how we're supposed to live. It's
Yeah.
not about not having challenges in our life or having answer to all our questions. Is having some kind of level of presence that allows us to face that in a good way without adding panic or anxiety or additional stress on top of what is happening,
Yeah.
right?
And that's runs so counter to what many people, many outlets would say, right? Which is that, if it ain't one thing, it's another, right? Life is a grind until you retire, right? This is sort of the messaging that we are
Mhm.
kind of hit over the head with. So what you're putting forth is that when we come into alignment, we can actually live in a way that is almost countercultural.
Yeah, you are the lighthouse in the storm, right?
Yeah,
So it doesn't mean there's no storm. It doesn't mean the world is not chaotic. It doesn't mean, everything is clear. But your inner being, something you have learned to connect to, is centered
yeah.
and knows and offer you wisdom.
Yeah. Well, so if someone is listening today and they're just feeling so stuck, what is one or two steps that they can take to start moving towards their sacred purpose? Obviously, signing up for the course is a great one, but if they're, feeling like so scattered and they just want like a little nugget of something they could do, what would you recommend?
Well, I think one of the exercise that works for everyone, because that's our biology is designed, is working with the breath.
Mm.
We live in a world where the mind is very activated. We're very, very, in this wind, as we call it, from a shamanic perspective. And if you are a lot in the wind, you need to work with the wind. And so you're going to work with your breath. And literally taking 3 deep breaths into your belly instead of your head,
Mhm.
inhaling into the belly and exhaling to the mouth, and doing that 3 times
Yeah.
is going to regulate your nervous system. And you can do that even with one hand on your forehead and one hand in the back, in this old brain, that create another energy techniques that really relax the body. Really. What we want is not really change what is happening, but change the way you are facing it. And
Mm,
so that change needs to come with yourself first. Right?
yeah.
I don't know any decision that I've made in my life that were better because I was stressed or anxious or in panic. I don't think I took any decision, but I know that when I learn these techniques and when I'm able to calm my system, not only I can better face what's going on in my life, but also, I nourish my body. I sleep better
Yeah.
and my capacity to answer is usually wiser.
Hmm. Yeah.
So there
So
is
it's
this reconnection to the body that very often we're not really connected. I know many people that go through the whole day and they haven't really checked in with their body. They don't even know they have a body, right? You haven't felt your hands, your feet, despite you walk all day because you're so outwards and in there, right? So there is that return. And that's, in fact, the first part of the program. We spend a lot of time to that connection because from there, we can really guide our life in a good way.
it's all simple, but not easy.
The three breaths seems very simple, right? And yet, how many people are having stress and anxiety and spend hours in their head about it instead of closing their eyes and taking three breaths? And you can
Yep.
do that on your way to Walmart. You can do that in the office. You can do that literally everywhere. But somehow, very often, the simple tools are very often forgotten. They seem too simple to be even relevant, right?
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I first started learning these tools, I was like, "This is it, really?" Like the first time I took a course in that world, I was like, "Come on, give me something more complicated, give me something more challenging." But no, that those sometimes the simple stuff is really the most effective and the most
Mm-hmm.
powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for somebody who is curious, maybe even inspired to move forward and find their sacred purpose, but they are just thinking about the demands of their everyday life, right? They've got bills to pay, they've got children, right? What would you say to someone like that is maybe concerned that they won't be able to balance both?
Mm. Well, I understand the concern, but somehow it never happens. Because somehow the energy you gain, the clarity you gain from going through this type of program give you what you need, the additional energy you need and clarity to navigate your actual life. So it not only is going to benefit you because if you look now and 3 months, 6 months, 12 months from now, you're going to be in a very different place, you know. If you don't change anything, where you're going to be in the same line, right? But if you start changing today, even little bits, within 6 or 12 months, you are in a very, very different place, right? And also, what happened is that it fuels your desire for change. So even that one step that I mentioned, even the first week program, what that client was saying is increasing your commitment, is reducing your fear. Like she mentioned a lot of things she was afraid of and concerned about. But right now, she's not really concerned about that because she started to see something else that is
Mhm.
possible that she had never experienced before.
Yeah.
So it's very hard, in many ways, people to sell people something that they have never experienced before, especially in an inner state, right?
Mhm.
And that's why I think it's really important to get a taste of it, to start having an experience of it, because then you don't just trust me in what I'm saying, because that's not really relevant. You're starting to trust what you're experiencing. I
Mm.
say, oh, wow, that's true. That really works.
Yeah.
And then you discover there is another way to live. There's another way to relate to the world. In fact, there is a very different way to be successful, to be really successful, and that includes abundance of money if it's something that is important to you. We're not talking about going living in a cave. We're talking about being engaged in this world in a very different way, in a
Yeah.
very different way.
So what you just said is basically that inner alignment comes first, and then that empowers you to find the outer alignment.
Yeah, I mean, if your GPS is broken, we have to fix the GPS first.
Yeah.
because if not, you keep, looking from that broken perspective. But if you have something that is centered and clear and aligned and relaxed, that's the next step you're going to take. That's the new path you're going to walk, and everything is going to unfold from that feeling. It's going to feel like that. But if you're stressed and you keep taking steps in that direction, the stress is going to be there, because that's what burst your decision, right? That's, to me, that sounds really simple and clear, right? But we don't always think of it that way, right?
No, we don't always think of that way. It is something that you would only think of when asked to reflect on it, probably by a mentor, teacher, or coach, right? Like, who were you when you made that decision? Because that's probably why the decision went the way that it did, right? A really stressed person makes a decision differently than somebody who's in, deep alignment, deep breaths.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Life. Yeah. Well, what final advice would you give to somebody who is ready to break free of this achievement trap, ready to walk their path, find their sacred purpose? Why now? Right. I'm sure a lot of people think, oh, I can do it later. Why now? Why should someone say, yes, I'm ready to do this now?
Well, this is the best days today, and maybe the better day was yesterday, right?
Or 10 years ago, right?
Or 10 years ago, right?
Before you had the crack on the head from the universe. Yeah. So
Yeah, I mean, at some point, I think, and it's a different point or place for every person, because we're all different. But at some point, um, life as it is become unacceptable. It was acceptable for a certain time, and then we come to a point with now. And the step to take, the question I often ask people is, say, what if you don't do it now? What if you wait 6 more months? Why don't do it down the line, in 1 year from now? What do you think will happen? And then I want you to feel into the same problem as they are today, that keep going and usually are going to increase. Is this really something you want? Or do you want to start stepping into that now, and in 3 months from now, you will not recognize who you are?
yeah.
What is 12 weeks? What is a few months of investment on the self in order to feel really different in your life?
Yeah.
Right? And what is the cost of not changing? People often think, I spend a lot of money on my coach. Is not a cheap person, right? I'm talking, in the 5-digit, right? Every year. Like, it's expensive. But the cost of not working with him would have been so much higher. And I'm not talking just financially. I'm talking on my health. I'm talking on my kids. What is the cost of my, I just have a new daughter for 3 months now, 4 months. What would be the cost on my daughter if I didn't make those changes? 50K, 100K, $1 million. I mean, on her health, on her emotional health, on having, someone that is balanced in her life. What number can you put on that? What number can you put on your health, on your stress, right? And I think that's really important, because often people think, well, when I had to hire my coach years ago, I was like, that's a lot of money every month, right? And he really, he didn't force me to hire him. I mean, he doesn't take anybody anymore because he has enough client, but he was like, just reflect on the cost of not doing it. And I wanted a different life. I know that even today, I have so much more potential. And I'm interested in exploring that. And I want to do it with a master. I want to do it with someone that's done it, and he's done it. He's transforming life many times over. And, is one of these very famous coach out there. And I want to learn from the masters. I want to learn from people that have that. And for me, that's worth the investment.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's really important to always question. Yes, okay, you have to spend some money. But when I look back, how much money I spent on things that brought nothing to my life. The other day I was thinking of it. If I were to add all the things and look at the number.
Oh, God.
Right?
Yeah. Yes.
Like, I would be scared to death. I'd
Yeah.
be like,
My 20s
oh
and
my God, I could have bought a car or a house with that, right? And so it's knowing really like there is nothing more valuable than you being in your purpose, healthy and happy.
Yeah.
There's not more value in anything you are going to experience in your life. Are you worth the investment? And that's, I think, really important to question it, you know?
Yeah. Well, Angell, thank you so much. I love being a student of yours. Anyone who takes this course is certainly very lucky to learn from you, to learn from a master. So thank you for diving in with us today and giving us a little bit more information about what they can expect.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Pleasure to be with you today. And thank you everyone for listening. Bye.